Hello everyone and welcome to Global Veg Fest. I want to shortly introduce myself. I'm Chef Justina. I work for a charity, Beef for Life. We support all the vegetarians and vegans. So if you are interested in more recipes, you can find it on our website. Otherwise, we are based in the UK, so we provide services for UK people. So if you have any interest at all to just read some recipes, feel free to just check them on the website. So you might wonder what I will be making today. So I'm originally from Lithuania. So I will be making pancakes, which are in specific region of Lithuania. In Lithuanian name, it will be called Žemaičių blynai. So let me start making the recipes. So this recipe will be veganized because in Lithuania, as many Europe places, they have a lot of animal products in there. So this is all veganized for you. So we'll start with flaxseed egg. So if you have never heard of flaxseed egg, I'm using ground flaxseed, which you might know otherwise elsewhere as linseed. So I've ground this linseed or flaxseed, if you like. I'm gonna add hot water. So you can use this flaxseed with cold water or take around 10 to 15 minutes to activate. So it will become more gelatinous. So now I'm gonna add hot water. That means we'll only take a couple of minutes since we want everything to be ready quite quickly. So we're gonna have a little mixture and we'll already start to thicken it up. So now I'm going to leave it on the side and forget about it for a couple of minutes until we prepare our pancakes. So this is potato pancakes filled with filling, which I will show you what I'm going to put inside. So the main idea is like giant gnocchi, if you're more familiar with that kind of cuisine. So we're going to start with chopping onion. So I'm using brown onion for this recipe, which I already peeled. So we're going to slice it in half. So we're going to make sauce and a salad as well. So it will be beetroot salad. So beetroot goes well with onions. So now we are multitasking. I have one frying pan for the filling, another frying pan for the sauce, and I have some bowls for the salad. So we're going to chop this onion and we're going to reserve some for the salad. And then I'm going to add some for the sauce and a little bit for our filling. So just have to distribute all this onion between 3 different portions. So one quite large onion. Of course, if you have to do any other onion, red onion will do just fine. But traditionally, brown onions are most commonly used in Lithuania. So just scoring that again, if you're looking for some tips how to do your onions, use bear claw method. Make sure you don't chop your fingers off. Just slice them all the way there. As you see, I left the root in there, so it holds the onion all together very well. So just scoring that in and chopping it very fine. Okay, so what we have at the end, just the root, which goes in our bin. Okay, so just chopping that roughly, and then already starting to preheat these pans. So for the sauce, I will add a little bit of vegan butter. So just a little bit of that in here, which will be making sauce something similar to bechamel or white sauce if you prefer. Just adding that in here, just slowly to start melting that in. Then we're gonna add, whilst it's melting in soft, we're gonna add a little bit for our filling, even though the frying pan is non-stick, just to get a little bit more color. So just adding some in the sauce and some in the filling. Okay, so distributing our onion, making sure it's cooking all really nice. Just swirling around that vegan butter around. Make sure it's cooking nicely. Same in this frying pan. Just forget about it. It's all cooking. It's all nice. It's really simple. So that will be multitasking. So now we're gonna add carrot. So we're gonna peel the carrot. So you can use a meat replacements in this case, such as soya mince or any other veggie mince you prefer. In this case, I will be using lentils. So my protein in this dish is lentils. So you don't have to use that. If you prefer something a little bit more funky, you can use sauerkraut, mushroom, or cabbage. There's different ways you can actually use this recipe. So now I'm gonna grate my carrot. If you have more time on your hands, you can just chop them in small cubes. So now I'm gonna just grate this because it's just much easier and it cooks faster, since we want the filling to be cooked all the way through. Then we're gonna be seasoning very simply using salt and pepper. If you like a little bit something extra, feel free to add a little bit of dill. Fresh dill is quite popular used in Lithuania. So this dish is eaten widely. If I would have had more time, I would have made cepelini. This is traditional Lithuanian dish, which is very similar. It's made from raw grated potato instead and is boiled. So it looks very similar, has the filling and the sauce on the top. It just takes around 2 hours to make it. So unfortunately, I don't have enough time to do that today. So we'll stick with these pancakes. Okay, so that's all done. Our onions starting to brown lovely. Just have a little mix in this frying pan and this one. So this one has much more butter because we're trying to make sauce, whilst this we just cooking everything all together. Okay, adding our carrots in here and just want them to be nice and soft, cooked all the way through. Okay, brilliant. So that's all in. Just distributing it all evenly around the frying pan. And now we can concentrate on our sauce because sauce takes a little bit longer. So I'm going to be using these lovely mushrooms. So these are oyster mushrooms. So these are king oyster mushrooms. They're large. You can have similar ones which are much smaller, and these could be used in sauces. So what I'm going to do, cut the top off, just exposing the middle part. Obviously, the top should not be discarded. I'm going to chop this quite finely and add it to our filling. So that will add a little bit more texture to it. If you like mushrooms a lot, you can do shiitake mushrooms. Has a lot of texture and flavor. So that could be only filling, onion and shiitake. That would be perfect. So the top goes in here. Whilst our sauce and onions cooking slowly, I'm going to chop the stalk in small cubes. So we kind of trying to make a traditional sauce which is used with animal products. So now we just use a mushroom instead. If you don't like mushrooms, perhaps you would prefer meat replacement, which could be nowadays bought as a lardon version. It's just meat replacements with other proteins. So that could be used as well. So it has smoky flavor as well, and it's quite nice and pink in small pieces, used in recipes such as vegan carbonara quite well. So small pieces in our mushroom. So this is really spongy and it's quite has a lot of texture. So I want to cook it quite well. So I want it to be quite nice and crispy. So that's why we have a lot of vegan butter in here. So it just really soaks up the flavors. In this case, we can start seasoning because you want this sauce to have a little bit more salt and carry more flavor. So I'm just gonna put some pink salt in here and some salt in here. The other good ingredient, if you shop in places as other places like Polish shops and Lithuanian shops, they have iodized salt. So it has extra iodine in the salt, which is quite good for vegan recipes. So you have to, while adding salt, you're adding some little bit more nutritious every time. So just lightly season those and cooking these slowly. So just mixing everything up. And then we're going to start with our potatoes. So what I've done before the session, I have boiled potatoes with skins. So if you have made gnocchi at home, you boil your own potatoes with skins in here. And then I have peeled them. So they're all completely peeled. For this recipe, I will use the ricer. So ricer is perfect instrument for this because it will squeeze everything all together and it will be like a potato mash. So just placing that in and just using a sitting bowl. So will look like noodles coming through here. You can use grater or mashed potato masher if you prefer. If you don't have a ricer, you should not need any fancy ingredients for this or fancy machinery. Just quite nice and simple. Put these in and squeeze them. A lot of larger shops will do rices with different attachments. So this is quite easy. So we want it to be really quite mushy. Ideally, if you make recipes like this, you want to cook your potatoes in advance. So it means the night before, you want your potatoes cooked and cooled with running cold water and placed in the fridge with skins on. So next morning you can peel the potatoes and rice them. That will make them really a little bit more harder. That means you have to add less flour and less starch, so which is quite convenient. Okay, just doing the rest of my potatoes, one potato at a time. Don't want to put too much pressure. And it's quite therapeutic just watching all these noodles coming out of a potato ricer. So that's quite entertaining. Okay, so that should be it. Gonna leave a couple more potatoes out. Just make sure everything is nice and squishy. Checking for more potatoes. I will get my hands in there to mix this up, whilst slowly keep an eye on our sauces if you have to reduce or increase the heat. Okay, sauce and the filling is cooking slowly whilst we're doing the rest. So we're gonna put that on the side and then add the rest of the ingredients. So just to show you, we made the flaxseed egg, which looks like that, just like a thick puree. So that goes in, really nice. That's what you want to achieve. Sometimes if you do it with cold water, it will take much longer to achieve this texture. So you have to wait until it's nice and thick. Then I'm gonna use corn flour and flour. So this is all depending on what potatoes you use. And if you have potato starch in your local shops, buy that instead. But since my local shop didn't have any, I use corn flour. So that I'm gonna mix everything up. So now when you buy your potatoes, you look for the starchy style potatoes. So this is King Edward potatoes, or you can use Maris Piper. It's quite easy to find. So a lot of starch in there. So we're gonna start with my spoon, just mixing it all in. We're gonna lightly season with pepper and salt. You can always add extra salt in water whilst cooking the potatoes, so you don't have to add so much in here. Mixing everything in and looking how it's coming all together. So now we're gonna get one hand dirty, making sure that it's all pressed. So just kind of pressing it with my hand, just really getting in there. And then checking how much is sticking. So I still have some flour, so just kneading it down until the flour is all mixed in. And checking if I need any more flour. So this is becoming a little bit more dense, which is good. That's what we want to achieve. I would like to add a little bit more flour just to be on the safer side, because otherwise they might fall apart when trying to shape them. So now I'm gonna slowly see that it's coming together nice. It doesn't stick to my hand as much. So that's ideal. That's what we want to achieve. So it's nice and soft. And I will just take a couple of balls and try to shape them. Just leave them in the bowl. We'll possibly make, this is a half a kilo of potato, by the way. So that will make around 4 or 5, depending on the size you want to work with. So everything is cooked. So the potatoes are cooked. The filling is cooked. So what we want to do just before serving, just kind of gently pan fry this. Okay, so that looks like little balls in here. And then checking on our sauce. Just checking on the sauce and the filling. Okay, the filling is cooking really nice. So I'm gonna add my lentils. So these are green lentils I cooked in advance in a vegetable stock. So that's something we'll add extra flavor, extra saltiness, and it just be really lovely when it's all cooked. So it's almost cooked, just heating lentils through. And then I have a bowl of water. So this helps me to shape if the dough is sticking. So one hand is covered with dough, so I just want to gently rinse that, and then we can actually start shaping. So just gonna dry my hand. It's not too wet, just them. And then I want to just shape it into a palm size. So if you have big palms, you will have bigger pancakes. If you have smaller ones like mine, then there will be smaller ones. So just flatten it all out. And then we're gonna add our filling. So for the filling, we just wanna mix it all up, make sure it's seasoned well, everything is cooked all the way through. Ideally, you would like it to cool for a little bit until you actually put it inside, but otherwise it should be all ready to go. So for this, I will just add everything in the bowl, so it's easier to serve from. And then we're gonna use same frying pan to fry these. So it's a little bit easier just keeping your sink clear of million of dishes trying to prepare a meal. So that's brilliant. So it's all in here, nice and clean. Just leaving that on the side so it's quite nice and warm. So next I'll be using a spoon just to put things in. And gonna have a tablespoon, so try to put less to start with. And then we're gonna start to add them straight in the pan. So make sure the pan is still nice and hot. And keep an eye on your mushrooms, just to show you they're browning quite nicely. So that's what we want to achieve, really nice and squishy on the inside, crispy on the outside. Okay, so adding our filling, so not too much, and then we can add another one in the middle, so a little bit on here, and then folding the sides, so a little bit of folding. So just want to fold the sides, and then it becomes like a little patty. So what we're going to do now, have a little bit damper hand, and then shape it. So what I'm doing, I'm pressing and turning, pressing and turning. So if there's any lentils try to poke out, make sure you seal them back in. You want everything to be sealed very nicely. And then we just play. We just little bit like pushing, a little bit of kind of pressing all together. And then we just flatten it. So you want to be quite flat so it cooks quite nicely. Gets a little bit brown on the edges. Still have a little lump of butter. Whilst it's still hot, I'm going to turn it down on the lower heat and adding my first pancake. I'm going to flatten that down, make sure it's nice and flat, and ready my spatula, taking all the carrots off. Let's do another one whilst we're here. Practice a little bit more, flatten it down. Make sure it's quite flat, depends how much filling you want to put in and how much of the size you want to have. So once again, adding the filling. Obviously try to, if you can squeeze a little bit more in, and then have another little piece of dough on the top and folding the sides. There's different ways of doing this, and there's different kind of techniques for this. So find what suits you the best. I've seen some people using gloves. If you bought too many gloves last year and you have some plastic gloves, this is a good way of avoiding sticking to your hands. So once again, shaping that. So if you will be making cepelinas, the one I mentioned before, traditional dish, would look like that, like a little bit of this shape. But this is similar, but not quite the same dish. So we flatten it. It's nice and flat. Okay, so just adding that in. So I'm using non-stick frying pan. You can add a little bit of vegan butter or oil. So gently just gonna lift the side and see how it's browning. There we go. So first one is already starting to brown. So we just want to gently brown the outside. Adding a little bit more oil could make it a little bit more nicer, but it depends how healthy you want the dish to be, because this will soak up oil quite well. So here, this is nice and brown. So that means we can start adding other ingredients into our sauce. So our sauce will have oat milk. So when you buy oat milk, make sure it's not sweetened, unsweetened, or anything really similar. That is no sweetener in that. So now I'm gonna add flour. So it's around 2 tablespoons of flour in here. Make sure it's nice and thick as we mix. And then slowly adding our plant milk. So if you prefer any other plant milk, feel free to use any other ones. I prefer oat milk because it's really subtle and really nice. Other secret ingredient for this is liquid smoke. So you might have heard of liquid smoke before. It's used for different dishes, just as chili. It's really nice to add into your chili, and it has the smokiness which you normally have it in the fire, that's how it's made. Liquid smoke could be bought on Amazon. So a couple dashes of that just to have this tasty kind of flavor in here. So that just gets mixed in. So whilst it's becoming really thick, I will use a spatula just to make sure that I get everything in the corners of the frying pan and lower the heat a little bit. So that's how it would be the top. So obviously the sauce could be made a little bit differently. Could be just white sauce. It could be with mushrooms. It's all up to you. Just mushrooms and white sauce if that's what you fancy. If you don't like mushrooms, There's always options for you, as I mentioned, with meat replacements or just simply onion and white sauce. So since it's thickened a little bit more, we'll add the rest and let it simmer slowly. So if smell-o-vision will be a thing, you would be smelling all the nice flavors in here. A lot of onion, a lot of smoke, just really nice. So now, whilst everything is slowly cooking, obviously keep an eye on it. Just a little bit on the side, just to check how it's browning. Could do a couple more minutes. So we'll start our salad. So salad is not the quite salad you will think with leaves. You think about it more like potato salad. So this is one of the recipes which would be celebrated in some celebrations or on the birthday table or Christmas even table. So we're going to use cooked beetroot. So this is cooked beetroot, which is in the shop, sealed in a plastic, not the ones in the jar, because the ones in the jar has vinegar. So these ones, I just want to cut them in small cubes, and as you see, I just swapped my chopping board because the wooden chopping boards are really hard to clean after you chop some beetroot. So it will stay in your hands, but it will be worth it. So small cubes, just slicing those up, depends how big is your beetroot. If you prefer not to touch it too much, you can grate that or just buy already sliced beetroot. But aim to buy the one without any added vinegar. So just chopping that up in small pieces, nice and easy. And if that's something you're not quite familiar, try adding more flavoring. This is quite plain salad, as I mentioned. It will be onions and it will be with some beans. So beans, another type of protein you can use in this, is quite nice, a lot of fiber, a little bit of chew. So just adding that in. Okay, so we're gonna have some beetroot and beans, and then we're gonna add vegan mayonnaise. So vegan mayonnaise is not the healthiest option when you think about salad, but that's why I mentioned potato salad, because you might be a little bit more familiar in that way. If you prefer to be a little bit healthier, you just add olive oil. That would be your safest option. So you could add a little bit of vinegar, which I will add. Now turn off the heat for the white sauce and add a little bit of vinegar. So it resembles a little bit like sour cream. So that would be quite traditional food to have with these pancakes. Adding a little bit of vegan mayonnaise. And I bought cannellini beans, which are quite small, and it's really nice for this dish. So not too much, especially if you're not a fan of beans, because that's quite an interesting recipe to try. Really easy. And it will be served with traditional bread. So traditional bread will be black bread or rye bread. So it's wholemeal, it is really dark, and it has a lot of flavor. So whilst you might think that beetroot is not very flavorful, beetroot and black bread is just one of those things. Just brilliant. That's something you definitely have to try. You can find German rye bread in Tesco or larger supermarkets. So that's something you might keep an eye on if you want to try. So our salad is ready. Just look at those colors. Like, how you could say no. That's brilliant. So I want to keep that on the side for serving. Just cleaning my hands very quickly from all this beetroot and batter. And then giving a last mix for our sauce. So it's thickened up nicely and it smells really lovely. So these should be ready by now. I will add them straight on our plate. Okay, just checking on the bottom. It's nice and brown. And this one as well. So that's really lovely. So these look like giant gnocchis, just as I said. And the real name is Giamaici Cipollini. And now we'll add the sauce as well. So just a little bit of sauce on the top. Make sure it doesn't overtake all our filling. If you prefer, you can put tomato sauce on the top if that's not type of food you would prefer. So that would be like a main dish. Sorry. And then I will serve our salad. So our salad, as I mentioned, comes with a rye bread, which I managed to find in my local Tesco. And we just add some of the beetroot in here. So that would be a lovely addition if you're planning a cold meal to start with whilst everything else is cooking, because these could be frozen, the pancakes that I mean, and this could be served just reheating in a frying pan or only in the oven. If you prefer less oil, you can just put them in the oven and reheat it that way. So you could be freezing, making loads in one day, putting them in the freezer, and ready to surprise your friends when they come around. So this would be something to start with. So a little bit of rye bread, which is nice and dark, and it's really nice just to kind of accompany salads, just like this one. And then for the main meal, you would have the pancakes, which is full of potatoes and your favorite filling. So thank you very much for watching today, and I hope you learned something and you got inspired, and perhaps you're gonna try some of these recipes. And don't be shy, and I'm happy to see you there. Okay, see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye for now.